Welcome to Prose and Cons, a podcast by writers for writers, brought to you by Precipice Fiction. Precipice Fiction would like to acknowledge the people of the Eora and Durag nations as the original custodians and storytellers of the land this podcast was created on.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Prose and Cons, a podcast by emerging writers for emerging writers. You've stumbled into the geek zone, and now we're going to proceed to geek out about a very old show that was just recently made into a new show, Avatar: The Last Airbender, as well as some other adaptations. We're going to get into it. But before we do that, I'm accompanied here by James Healy here. You know him. You love him. Here he is.
Hello, I'm James Healy. I'm a writer and freelance editor.
Woo! Then we got Matan, the English teacher extraordinaire.
What am I? Who am I?
You're the English. I'll just leave it there. You're the English.
Or is it like the English ... or is it like the English full stop?
Full stop.
Okay. Hi, my name is Matan. I am an English teacher. I teach it to high schoolers, which means that most of the time they're not paying attention. And I also write for Precipice Fiction and for some other places. And I do some editing on the side because why not?
And I'm Phoenix Rig. It's lovely to talk to you all today. I'm also a freelance editor, founder of Bent Light Writing. I've talked about it at the intro of a bunch of other episodes. We focus on putting authenticity first. And I'm also a writer working on a novel at the moment. That's been fun. I also have a story in the new Mythic. And by the way, new Mythic, I think as we speak, the audiobook is out.
Yeah, it'll be in the next 12 hours, I think.
Woo! Dang.
Yeah.
I found myself getting confused with the time zones. I was like, it's out today? Or is that tomorrow? Or I don't know what that is.
It's out on the 7th, but then that doesn't mean anything to us anymore because we're spread across different time zones.
Well, this is the European episode, so we're actually pretty close to each other right now.
Yeah, welcome to Pros and Cons European edition. I'm coming at you live from Barcelona. We got James coming in from Ireland and Matan from Israel. But anyway, before we jump into our topic, what have you all been reading, watching, all of that? Matan, we'll start with you.
All right, so for those of you that have been following, I'm a university student. I'm studying English literature. So most of my reading is imposed on me by greater forces, namely my professors, who at the moment want me to read the Gospels. I like literally the Bible, because we're reading Western literature.
Whoa.
We read, Homer, Sophocles, some Oedipus, all the good stuff. Which is not Western literature, by the way. Is it Western? Never mind. The point is now we're reading the Bible. And I gotta say, first of all, I'm Jewish. Okay, I'm Jewish. Me and Jesus, I got nothing against the guy. He's just a total stranger to me. And the guy's dropping some...
bit of friction.
He's dropping some bombs. Like, he's got some good lines. Like, people come to him with questions, and he's like, don't worry, man. I got you. I got exactly the solution for you.
Mm-hmm.
So... from an academic from a narrative standpoint, I gotta say, there's some really good stuff in the Gospels. You got seduction, temptation. I'm not trying to convert anyone, right? Like, just from a story standpoint, there's some really interesting stuff over there. Have a look. If you're not, Catholic, Christian, if you're a Muslim, Jew, whatever, have a look. It's short. It's a good read, really. I feel like a pilgrim, like I'm a missionary.
Oh, the Gospels. That's like a specific book, right?
It's the New Testament. Sorry, we call it.
That's right. Yeah.
Specifically, I've been reading Matthew, Luke, and Romans.
Good stuff. Love it when the Bible comes up. It's always a fun one to bring up.
It's not that often, but it's a bit more often than we expect it to. So
yeah. James, how about yourself?
I've just read The Fungus. Harry Adam Knight. I don't know when it was published, but it's one of those kind of 1970s London gets hit by some kind of post-apocalyptic event. In this story, it's science gone wrong. All of the various types of fungus are kind of supercharged. They start going to the small team is sent in to try and fix the problem. Kind of disastrous results. Real gross out kind of story. Ugly, fungally bodily things that you can think of going on. And one of those stories where humanity is really painted as like the worst. All of the characters, all the POV characters in it are just awful people. So yeah, it was a very enjoyable read. Definitely falls in my kind of area, and I imagine a lot of the inspiration from The Last of Us and The Girl with the Gifts were probably derived from this, because I feel it was a much older story, and it kind of had seeds of those later kind of stories in it. So a good story for anyone that likes kind of 1970s London post-apocalyptic.
Nice. So this was before The Last of Us.
Yes. Yeah.
Wow.
Well,
okay.
As an avid eater of mushrooms, I always felt like they'll get back at us at some point. Like they're not just going to take it forever, you know?
Yeah, I mean it's the themes of The Last of Us, but it's literally that same sort of sensation of like they can already do it to insects, like they've got a taste for it, and it's like it's like a weird thing. Like I don't know. Yeah.
They got a taste for what? For killing?
for dominating,
changing like neurochemistry,
dominating life forms.
Strange way of interacting with living things and creating parasitic or symbiotic relationships.
Not to go off topic, but it was on the news that a mushroom was growing out of a frog recently. Has anyone seen that? Like
that's bigger again than an insect.
It's escalating. Yeah, I just saw the headline. Like scientists can explain this, and I think it was coming out of its knee. Do frogs have knees? Never mind. I'll look it up. Back to you on this.
Is growing out of it or growing on it? Or do you not know?
Well, out of it and on it. Like starts from. What's the difference?
I guess it's like did it fruit from within the frog, or did it enter its blood and then come out, or did it like is it just more of a this is important, Matan.
I got you.
We might cut this out of the podcast.
No, I got you. I'll be back in like 10 minutes with an essay. All right, keep going.
Facts.
With the frog's knee update.
It was like you're just listening to a literary podcast one day, and that's like the first inclination of the mushroom knee epidemic.
I mean, this is
how a horror movie starts, you know, like a guy's listening to a podcast in his car, and suddenly there's a mushroom growing out of his knee.
Yeah. Well, now this is becoming, in this moment, this started to feel like a pretty cool fiction. I'm not gonna lie. Like,
no, there you go. Frog found with mushroom growing from its side. A frog in India, of course, it's in Asia, sprouting. Researchers have never seen anything like it. That's just what you love to see, right? I'll send you the picture later.
Nightmare.
This got too real too fast. Anyway, I've been reading Hyperion still. Loving that.
Woo. Yes.
No, it's been fantastic. And he's got such an authority with how he writes. Like it's just so steady. It's just like he something about it feels so steady. His pacing is so solid, and he just tells it, and he just goes, and he just throws it out there, and he does it with such confidence. And it's all so well-rounded and well-grounded. Like none of it feels outlandish. It's just like, oh yeah, like you feel it.
Yeah.
And I haven't started it yet, but I do think I am going to start The Terror an audiobook. I really want to. We talked about that one last time, Matan.
Nice.
And I'm going to be listening to that. And recently, I've also been watching a little bit of Avatar: The Last Airbender, the 2024 remake, live action remake, and that's what we're here to predominantly talk about today. So, James, you were able to watch the first episode?
I did, yeah. I watched the first episode myself, yeah.
Okay, so Matan, you've seen the cartoon and the animated series and everything,
I
right?
want to rephrase this. I have not seen the cartoon, Phoenix. I have lived it.
Okay, yes, I'm right.
I have experienced the Avatar experience.
You've experienced the phenomenon that's sweeping the nation,
and have resented James Cameron for years, by the way, for daring to name his movie Avatar.
Oh yeah, the blue people, not the Last Airbender, or the opposite.
I don't care. They made $3 billion like in the box office. Anyway,
but so for some context, I myself have also experienced the animated series, as Matan has, and then we've watched. I haven't watched all of the live action series, but the first 2.5 episodes. And then James is coming in as which I'm very thrilled to have here. He's our sample. He's coming in blind. So he started with this live action series. He hasn't seen the animated series, which I love that we can have that cross section of conversation. And actually, James, I'd love to start with you. What are your first impressions with this being your introduction to the world of Avatar?
So I thought I knew nothing about this, and then when I started watching it, I realized that I've heard conversations about it. So I was a little bit familiar with the concept of the fire people wanting to go to war and the prince
Sorry, that's reductive, but go on.
Oh, sorry, the firebenders. The firebenders wanted to go to war, and the prince of their people searching for some kind of chosen person or something. And apparently he's known as a character who has a very good character arc. The prince, whose name I forget. But that was about it.
Zuko.
Zuko?
Yeah.
Okay. That was about all I knew.
Mm-hmm.
Given this live action remake, I felt like it was very rushed. It did make me, it's probably not a good sign. It made me want to go back and watch whatever the original was, because I felt like there were interesting things going on, but the story was kind of trying to really rush through a lot of it. Certainly for the first half of the first episode, I felt like they slowed down a little bit once the story reached the point where they're all living in this ice village.
Mm-hmm.
Personally, I would have been happy if it had been most of the episode with them there, and then they get attacked by the firebenders, just to give the characters time to kind of develop. But that was my impression with this, was that it might be a little bit too much of a rush to get to these kind of action set pieces, or maybe these kind of dramatic beats, without maybe putting the work in to develop the characters. But it seemed like it had some interesting stuff there that definitely made me interested, more so to go back and look at the original. I felt like I was probably watching probably a not very well done version of probably possibly a better story, was the impression I got.
You said almost verbatim a lot of the notes that I had for, like, in terms of, well, for starters, so you feel like they could have just started with them in the snow village and just gone from there? Is that what you said?
I would have definitely worked. That's what I would have done if I was kind of taking that episode on, and I would have had, because the way it happens is it starts with a big action sequence in an alleyway, which I thought was a pretty good way of explaining, there's people who can use fire, there's people who can use earth, and then kind of introduce you to the world relatively quickly.
Yeah.
But then they jump into another big action scene where the firebenders attack the airbenders, and then it kind of like it starts again, and 100 years have passed, and I was kind of like, is it just going to keep jumping from thing to thing, and we're never going to settle? But then it settled for a little bit. But I would have started there with that settled section. I would have used those big set pieces for later on, when you maybe had a bit of time, because I think an action scene is only as good as its setup and what's its stakes are. So I was kind of seeing like extras fighting extras, and I didn't really have much engagement in it. Whereas it could have been presented later on, once we got to know the main character, and this is like something terrible that happened in his past. This is how he lost his people. That would have been more interesting if I'd been introduced to him first, then realizing his people are lost. Instead, I was kind of introduced to a bunch of characters I didn't know, and then they all fought, and most of them died.
Well, you described the animated series.
Basically, like, while you were describing your suggestion, I think me and Phoenix that's exactly what happens in the original. Like they start with the people.
Yeah, I mean okay. It just seemed like the obvious way of telling that. So I wonder why they decided to change it around.
Mr. Host, can I have the stage to advocate?
Please.
All right. Okay. Listen, look, I watched the whole thing in 2 days. Like I binged the crap out of it. I'd like to describe it as beautiful mediocrity. And what do I mean by that?
I think I know what you mean, and I think I agree.
What I mean by that is that I enjoyed the hell out of it. I loved Avatar for years, one of my favorite shows. I think me and Phoenix agree on, like, we both feel like that show is close to our hearts. Maybe because we watched it at a certain age where it really had a lasting effect on us. Maybe I don't know, but I really love it. It means a lot to me. Maybe I watch it with like rose tinted goggles. Like maybe I'm not even objective when it comes to that show. But you just, especially after the failed adaptation from 2010, I think you just don't expect these kind of things to really be adapted effectively. You kind of, you resign yourself to the fact that it exists as a cartoon, and that's going to be the extent of it. And because these kind of shows are just too full of things and effects and stuff to really be to come to the big screen or to the silver screen. And I tried to watch the animated show with my wife earlier this year, and it didn't age well. I think to show it to, especially to now that we're adults and we're trying to show it to other adults, like if you haven't started watching it at a certain age, let's be honest, it's just the humor is a bit childish. Especially season 1 is rough
Yeah.
around the edges, and it's really hard to get someone to get into it. And guess what? My wife watched all 8 episodes of the Netflix version, and she loved it because
Hey, okay.
same with One Piece, by the way. I would never dream of trying to get her to watch One Piece, the anime, but she watched with me and enjoyed the entire Netflix show. Now, is it inferior? Of course it is. These kind of shows work so much better in 20 minutes bites in cartoon, where you can go crazy with the bending and you take your time, and you got 20 episodes a season. Then honestly, Netflix asking them to do this in 8 episodes is a bit cruel. I think 10 is the easy decision. I'm guessing it's about money. But yeah, I'm going back to my point, which is beautiful mediocrity. I thought it's so hard to do this. And that's the context with which I'm judging this show. It is so hard to do this.
Yeah.
Can the acting be better? A little. Can the writing be better? A little. Did they still get some of the good things right? Like the Zuko-Iroh relationship really is beautiful throughout the show, especially later in the season. And I'm not going to say my whole spiel now because there's a lot of stuff we can talk about, but I'm very happy with what they've achieved. Of course, it can be so much better in so many ways. And James, you spotlighted such a good piece of criticism, which is if you keep jumping like prologue, people just don't care. It's like, are you just gonna jump again? Like, should I get attached to these characters, or are we gonna have another time skip? But yeah, these are my 2 cents.
Yeah. No, I agree. I do, like, I'm watching it, and largely, like, when I was watching episode 1, I was like, I feel that itchy feeling that I feel when I really don't like something, but I don't fully understand why I don't like this yet. And I started to pick out things that I didn't like. But I will give it some praise. There are some sequences that I did really like, and I was like, oh, they some certain moments with Sokka where I was like, wow, he really nailed that humor beat, but he's also kind of making it his own, like he's adapting the character a little bit, and I appreciate that, like, really cool. I really like that they changed Zhao and kind of his role in the show. I like that was the first like big character deviation that I saw, that I was really like, oh, nice. I like that they're taking it their own way, like with the character archetype as well as his story, which was cool. It feels so, in terms of anchoring a story, I feel they could have started it better, like James said, particularly like,
yeah,
it felt like they wanted to come in, and this is kind of a symptom of movies today, because people like these big set pieces and they rely on set pieces to hook people, when at the end, like, character your time on bringing out a real human scene, you're going to hook people like crazy. But people want these flashy things to bring people in and get them to stay that way. But in the end, it ends up kind of being hollow. And like you said, James, like, action is as good as the buildup and the setup to it. And so that's what happened. You have these 2 prologues, which traditionally, or at least in the animated series, were not prologues. They were fed in through other moments, given through context in other scenes.
Right? In the end, nothing. There was straight, let's start. Main timeline. Let's go.
Yeah, no, but like it's given throughout the show. Like later, as you flashbacks, and especially like some of the stuff around the great grandfather of Zuko. That's one of the best episodes in the series. And I think I want to say it got some special recognition. There's an episode where Aang is called into the spirit world to explore his history at the same time that Zuko gets a mysterious note telling him, you need to read about your grandfather. And you have these beautiful parallel storylines between Aang, the hero, and Zuko, the anti-hero, where they're both exploring their past. It's very, very good. But anyway, that's how you're getting these prologues, but we're already invested in these characters at this point. Whereas here, we're given all of these characters that we don't really know, we don't really understand. We're giving these big action sequences that we don't really understand the stakes of. And then it's a note that I give to a lot of authors, like, we're 20 minutes into episode 1 and we've just started the story, essentially. And I'm like, that's a little bit long to start a story. And it made me feel like I was kind of floating. And I had to do that thing where sometimes in a show where I have to like stop, and I actually had to think, like, what are we doing right now? Why are we going where we're going? And I had to kind of do those sorts of check-ins. That's my general first impression call out.
Yeah.
I guess So this is one other thing that I think about this as well. They put a lot of energy into replicating aesthetics and costume and places like to the T. They're very like almost identical to the animated series. What did you two think about that? James, obviously you didn't know that it was copied. So like what did you think about the aesthetics of the show and like things like that?
I guess I was kind of wondering myself during some of the fight scenes, I guess, what would this look like, I guess, as an animated thing? Because partly I was kind of thinking that some of it looked a bit goofy. I was thinking it looks kind of goofy because it's like live action, and perhaps these were done initially in cartoon and it had a different feel to it or a different look to it. And then I guess, yeah, I don't really know what to make of it. I guess some of the scenes went on, though they were quite long, and I was thinking, oh, is this like the meat of this show? Are they going to be? I'm thinking specifically about the action scenes. I was thinking, like, is this what it's that they decided to kind of make these big, kind of CGI kind of fight scenes and stuff now because they have the technology and they want to do it live action? Is that the idea? And yeah, I guess I didn't really massively connect to it again because I didn't really know who the characters were and stuff. Particularly the scene where the firebenders came in and attacked the airbenders. There's an awful lot of stuff happening there, and I was trying to get a feel for, is the show trying to set up this is how the abilities work, or are they trying to say like this is what people could do and this is what people do? And there was just so much elaborate stuff happening that I was like, maybe they're not, maybe they're just going to keep shooting fire in different ways. So I didn't really know what to make of it. Exactly.
As far as the aesthetics go, I agree with James that CGI is never gonna feel amazing. I think there were some scenes maybe later in the season that lean more heavily on practical tricks, practical effects, which work better. There's a specific fight scene between Zuko and Aang in a market, I think in one of the later episodes, where they don't really use much bending because the plot basically dictates it, because they're in the middle of a busy market. They can't just burn people and they don't want to get caught by the police. So they're trying to be really sneaky about it, like trying to sneakily attack each other without revealing that they're benders.
Yeah.
And I thought that was one of my favorite fight scenes because it makes sense. It's not that they're trying to save money in production. Well, they are trying to save money in production, but it's not that's not the reason why the characters are not blowing each other out to flaming smithereens. It's because Zuko is in an Earth Kingdom city. He cannot use firebending, and Aang doesn't really want everybody to understand the Avatar is right here, right now. So they kind of like chip shot each other, kick each other, throw plates at each other, and I thought that was a really good fight scene because
I like that.
The practical effects, and here and there there's a little bit like Zuko sneaks in a fireball, and I thought that's a really creative way to have a fight scene that's a bit comical and leans on the practical effects. But to more directly answer your question, Finks, because I also noticed that they really wanted to imitate like to the color of the vest, the clothes, like it was copy pasted out of the cartoon, the anime, and I didn't love it. I see why they did it. It always feels weird to me. Like real life is not that colorful. Like maybe go close, but don't. Like, you know what I mean? Like on the one hand, they're being stealthy. On the other, they're like a walking street light. They're all glowing yellow and blue. Like everyone can tell you're from the Water Tribe if you're wearing bright blue clothes. Like you're allowed to wear something that's not a primary color. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, to me it felt like I think like this was not designed for live action. These styles were created for a cartoon and it works in the cartoon, but that doesn't mean it translates well to live action stylistically. Like the cartoon had its own style, its own animation, its own like all these things. And I felt like they missed out by trying to copy and paste that because it ended up looking a little bit silly to me, and it made me like not take it as seriously as I could. Like they freaking copy pasted Uncle Iroh into live action. And I was like, you really did not need to do that. Like capture his essence, his writing, and don't make him look like that.
Yeah, I understand.
It looked so
but he's so good in this show. He's so good. He's one of the highlights. Him and Zuko.
Okay. Like I like Zuko's performance. I do.
Take everybody out, just make it into a spin-off about these two, and I think you guys
I quite admire. I kind of admire their efforts to put the same thing on live screen, but I think there kind of needs to be some kind of adaptation, and you need to kind of make it its own thing as well a little bit. Like you need to make it, if you're saying like the fight scenes are choreographed the same way, It's kind of like, oh, you know what's
Not
coming the
quite
whole
that.
time.
Yeah.
Sorry?
More so with like costumes and
Costumes,
the
okay,
way
yeah.
that they design places and stuff.
Yeah.
The fight scenes aren't quite choreographed the same. Like they do.
Oh, cool. Okay.
They do take liberty with the story, and they're doing some stuff with that. It's more so just like the visual aesthetic of yeah, costuming and character design and location design and stuff like that. Yeah. I do want to say, like, it's not an easy job, because very easily they could have been like, yeah, you know what, we're gonna adapt a bunch of stuff, we're gonna make our own take on it, and they could just as easily have gotten the exact opposite argument where it's like, oh, they weren't true to the show at all, they changed so much, like, what are they doing? So it's really like you got to go with your gut, and then you know, like if it hits, it hits, but you know, sometimes it doesn't quite hit.
Well, I think a good example is the Harry Potter series. If you look at the movies, the first two movies, the kids are walking around in very true to the books robes. Like they're always walking around with these wizard robes. And when the third movie was made, I think the director kind of thought, well, it's kind of silly because these are kids, these are teenagers, they don't look comfortable. Like, why would they be walking around in robes all the time? And then he suddenly said, okay, you know, Hermione and Harry can wear jeans.
Yeah.
And I think that was a great choice, because suddenly the actors, they look more comfortable. I think they can. There's something. Sometimes I think putting the outfit puts you in the character. Like even the prosthetics that sometimes actors put, like Marlon Brando when he used to put the prosthetics to be the Godfather. I think that used to help him get into the character. But sometimes it also hinders you, right? Like all these extra stuff. Maybe naturally be better.
There are times where like I don't know, the same thing I feel like with actor delivery of certain lines versus just like reading it in a book as well. It's like sometimes like let the actor drop some words. Like it doesn't need to be word for word rigid. Like it sometimes they don't sound as good read out loud. Like just let it flow, like, and just talk, because it's a different delivery and it doesn't always land.
There's the famous Dumbledore said calmly.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
For the fourth book, James, I don't know if you know, so there's this famous controversy about Harry Potter where in the book Dumbledore says something calmly, but in the movie he screams his heart out with the very same line. Like,
yeah.
And yeah, the community has been having fun with
it. Love that. Okay.
Yeah. But yeah, I think just, you know, tackling an adaptation that's so loved. We've seen it with IP in general. We live in the world of IP right now, right? The kingdom of IPs. If you don't have an IP cow, then what are you doing in this industry? And
wow, true.
So Netflix is just trying its best, you know, throwing darts, One Piece, Avatar, Witcher, trying to find their next Stranger Things.
Yeah. I also noticed, and we talk about this a lot in our own fan fiction and kind of pitfalls with that. But I noticed a lot, like you could just tell that, you know, there's a lot of the writing revolved around leaning on recognizability of the show, and like just the way that they plugged in name drops of like, oh, and what was your name again? Or like, and who are you? And like just like really dropping the name of like, this person is this character from the show. And that's how it felt to me, and it just feels like I know for the first episode, just like a lot of like name drops felt a bit like heavy, like they wanted to like drop the names with some weight, as opposed to just like in the show, we don't know who in the animated series, we don't know who any of these people are. And through their actions and interactions, we learn who they are and begin to build investment with them. This show has the double-edged sword of recognizability, so the temptation is there to, they drop a name and the viewership's already going to know who it is and why that person is significant. But if you're relying on that, you're not actually building the character. So the ending sensation is one of dissatisfaction. But it's a tricky thing, because you know, that's why it's a double-edged sword, is you have this recognition and you have like, oh, I'll say the name and the viewership's already going to be up to speed. But in the end, the quality of the show, I feel like it falls, and you kind of hinder yourself a bit by doing that, because you're sacrificing you need to treat it like a separate entity fully, build the characters all the way up, get my investment all the way back in it. Because otherwise I'll know, yeah, I know who these characters are, but I don't care about the show. I don't care about them in this context. I'll just go watch the animated series if I want to do that.
But let's talk about the Harry Potter series again. They never do that. They never drop Sirius Black's name in the first movie just to get you like, ooh, Sirius Black is
No,
coming.
exactly.
They don't do that. They don't say like, oh, I know a guy who happens to know stuff about werewolves in the end, in the post-credit scene of the second movie. Like they don't do that crap. And I think that's an example for an adaptation that kind of did you even think about these kind of things. I think that's the Marvelization of IPs, isn't it? Like there's more. What you see on the screen is not enough. What's off stage is just as important.
It's true.
Yeah, I was taking into account as well, I guess, the internet and creating a buzz around the next thing that's going to come out.
Yeah. So I watched a bit more of the live action one today, and I did go back afterwards and just rewatch the first episode of the animated series just for reference. I was like, I want to see what they did and see just how it feels again. And yeah, they just start, and it's such a better start, just literally, I feel, where they start in the Ice Village, and it's a very quiet start. You just start with Sokka, and they give you all the backstory in just the opening credit sequence, like as in like it's an extended version of the intro song in quotes. Basically, it's not really a song, but like the standard intro for the show is just a little bit extended for the first episode to just give you like crash course. 100 years have gone by. Fire Nation's bad. That's all you need to know. Let's get into the characters. So you drop in, and it's really quiet. You just have Sokka and Katara. So it's very few characters, and you're just watching their interactions. There's not a lot of names to pick up on. They start dropping in context of bending and what that's like in the show. And they build it up really slowly. And one of the things that I feel like they missed by jumping in with these big action sequences is not only do we not know who these characters are and not really care, but also we're dropping you in with master level bending, which doesn't mean as much when you don't know what novice level bending looks like and what the work that goes into become a bending master. Like in the animated series, we start with Katara, who's like can barely do anything, and she's like amazed that we know she can move waves figuratively with water bending and stuff, and that's our intro to it. Is we see this struggle with bending and how hard it is, and Sokka makes some comments about like, oh, magic water and stuff. And it's like this really slow build to bending. And with that, we get this grassroots reveal. We start literally in a very small village and then go out into the wide world. And we also start with a very small example of bending and then go out into the wide world and see what this can do and what it can become. And that's a slow build throughout the show. So that when you get to these major fight scenes between masters, it's like, whoa, like there's so much. It's really hectic because, we have that feeling of progression too by starting in the grassroots with Katara, essentially. I felt like that was missed by jumping in with these big master sequences. It feels like it was more like crowd service, we're here, or fan service. We know what bending is, and we're coming in, we want to see these big sequences, and I feel like that's kind of what it came for me a little bit.
Yeah, so my assumption was that everyone in this world could do bending at that level from having watched the first few scenes. So I had been wondering what were they going to do for pacing if that's going on in the beginning, where they're pulling walls down and setting everyone on fire and stuff. How do you keep that pace going? So it's kind of a surprise to hear that they're going to have to drop back and then have characters build up to that again. So I thought everyone could just do that.
I want to drop another big boulder of context into the conversation, though, because this show doesn't just exist in the shadow of the animated show. It exists in the shadow, if we can call it, of the previous attempt at an adaptation.
Yeah.
And the criticism of that thing. And suddenly you are twice removed from the source material, because it's not enough that you're adapting the animated show. You also have to see what your relationship with the previous much maligned adaptation from 2010 and how you distinguish yourself from it. So the 2010 one does, I believe, I haven't watched it in many a year, does start identically to the animated show. So maybe you think to yourself, do we want to see Batman's parents get killed again? You know what I mean? Like, do we really want to do the same thing a third time? So they're kind of in a corner that they kind of should do something different. They kind of should. And I agree that if we sent a publishing house the first 10 minutes of the animated show as the first few chapters, and the first 10 minutes of the Netflix show as the first 10 chapters, the Netflix show is going to get rejected for too much exposition, too much, heavy-handed, like just but still, I don't think it's fair to judge them in a vacuum, because it just doesn't exist in a vacuum. It exists with the failed movie, which was criticized, by the way, heavily for not featuring exciting enough bending. That was one of the biggest gripes that the audience had with it. Like, you'd see these people dance for 20 minutes to barely raise a pebble.
Oh my gosh.
So if you remember that beautiful scene, yeah.
Yep.
So,
oh my gosh.
James, look it up. Seriously, look it up. Earthbending in M. Night Shyamalan's. Anyway, the point is
this. Oh, it was
this.
an M. Night Shyamalan thing, was it? Oh no.
Oh yeah.
I forgot it was M. Night Shyamalan.
I'm sure he went to a brain surgeon to get that part of his life out of his memory. But my point is this: if I know that the previous adaptation was heavily, heavily criticized for having sucky bending, maybe I do start with a super action Earthbender kick-ass fighting, like to show, to establish this is not going to be like that. Your biggest criticism, out of the way. There you go. Action straight out of the way. CGI, money, people jumping around, extras fighting extras, like James said. So again, this doesn't just communicate with the animated cartoon, it also communicates with the failed predecessor. And I think a lot of the times the things that it does, it's like, we can't go there because that would get us flamed, like they got flamed. So yeah,
that's a good point. Yeah,
it's true. I do like in this a lot more. That I saw the movie when it came out and I haven't seen it since, so I don't exactly remember what it looked like.
Bad Phoenix, it was bad.
No, I found myself wishing, like, I like how they're portraying bending. I like what they're doing. I guess I wish that it had a little bit more martial influence. I feel like the martial influence was taken out a little bit. Not all the time in the animated series. There are times where they just like punch and a rock goes over there, but like then there are some really beautifully animated sequences with, and I hope maybe that's brought back in some. They have some of that in here, but I find myself missing that a little bit, I guess.
We just want a good adaptation. We're not asking for much, We just want to be kids again. That's all we want.
Yeah.
That's what we really want. We want the clock to go backwards.
Yeah. We want it to be Saturday morning and season 2 of Avatar, to air on Nickelodeon.
I did find myself looking at this while watching it and just being like, I do feel like this is like, I'm calling out some things, but also in fairness, I'm like, this does feel like a tough one to adapt. Like I know there are some things that I would be curious to try, but it's like, I don't know if they would work necessarily. I know I would put like maybe a little less focus on costume synchronicity and a little less work on character, like kind of copy paste, and a little bit more work on the story building element, but like, and more human. I don't know. I know I would do that. And I do think that would make it better. But again, that's my thing that I'm writing then. So I'm biased, but like, but it doesn't feel easy, especially like looking at Appa and Momo. I'm just like, oh, gosh, I don't like it in live action. But at the same time, I don't know what I would do. It's like
exactly. If you take them out, it's the X. You get X from the fans. Where's Momo? Where's Momo?
Yeah, you can't take them out.
But then you see him and I'm like, oh, you gave me what I wanted.
Yeah. Weird.
Thanks, I hate it.
Yeah.
Thanks for doing exactly what I told you.
All right, here's Momo. Oh God, thanks. I hate it. It's so true.
Someone get across.
I did. Okay, favorite scene so far when Avatar Kyoshi for when she shows up to like fight off the fire benders from Kyoshi Island in the second episode. I did have like a ooh moment. Like that was really cool for me. Like, and it felt like they took a really unique portrayal on what a fully realized Avatar looks like.
Yeah.
and it really like shook me. I was like, that was badass. Like that was the moment where I that was the most dropped into the show I felt, and I actually had like goosebumps for a second. Like she fucking just like took off like a superhero, but it felt in the context of the show, and it really felt like, oh snap, that's what it would look like to be on the ground floor with an avatar on that level. Like it would look like that, and that was cool.
Would not be a good experience.
No.
Yeah, Kyoshi. I've had some thoughts on Kyoshi. Most of them very pleasant. We're gonna leave it at that. Nice portrayal. Yeah, that was one of my favorite scenes. But the one I liked the most, and I'm gonna spoil both of you, and who cares?
Wow, I'm just gonna let you.
Yeah, is that a scene that did not exist in the animated show? That's one of my favorites. So, James, it's been out since 2006. I don't care if I'm spoiling you.
Go ahead.
Uncle Iroh lost his son in the war.
Oh yeah.
And that's part of why he's so close to Zuko. They're kind of surrogate father and son to one another. And in the Netflix show, they added a scene where Iroh is grieving his son, and people come to comfort him. And Prince Zuko comes with his father, and he says this very like, Uncle Iroh, it's a great honor for your son to have died in service of the Fire Nation. And he bows, and Uncle Iroh bows, and Zuko turns to leave after having said exactly what's expected of him to say, right? But then Zuko kind of stops. Everybody else walks away, and Zuko just goes back and just sits next to him quietly. That little gesture, he just sits there quietly for a while, and then he says, in a much less practiced and robotic manner, like, Lu Ten, the son of Iroh, like, he gave me this thing before he died. I thought you should have it back. And then just Iroh quietly sheds a tear, and Zuko just sits there with him as other people come to comfort him, just like quiet emotional support. And I thought that was so beautiful. That was a really touching scene. And it did not exist in the animated version. So,
very cool. Kudos.
Are we going to do worst scenes, or?
I don't know. If you have one off the top of your head, I don't know if I have one.
Anything with Jet. If you get to the Jet,
anything
that included Jet is like, it can't be 14 and a terrorist. Okay, it doesn't work. Choose one or the other. All right. He's either a horny teenager or he's a dangerous terrorist. All right.
I think I just met Jet, but it was like the only character that they didn't name drop. So I was like, ooh, I like that they didn't name drop.
Oh, but you saw him with the ponytail. You haven't seen him with the Beatles haircut yet, right?
Oh, well, maybe I haven't seen him then, because I didn't see someone with a ponytail.
They first introduced him with a ponytail, like, oh, what a nice reimagining, of a cringy looking character. And then he shows up later with like the Asian version of Justin Bieber, like, what the, yeah, it did not translate well.
I love that. Like, he shows up with a ponytail, and it's like, what a crazy reimagining. What an amazing.
Yeah, I loved it.
A ponytail.
A men bun. It's more of a men bun, I guess.
Yeah. Or to quote Sokka, a warrior's wolf's tail.
Yeah.
That's right. I can quote. Well, I think we'll close down there. Are there any closing remarks from that either of you would like to make?
I'll just say, look, this is hard for them. It's really hard. A lot of money. I guess it's terrifying for a lot of people to take on a project like that. Terrifying for the actors that don't know if they'll get a second season, and if their reputation will be besmirched forever. Terrifying for the producers trying to get Netflix to invest so much money. And I think with a project like this that is so dear to so many people, I think it's admirable, that people are willing to do the legwork and willing to give it a try and to bring this to a new generation. And it's not perfect, it's far from it, but I appreciate it.
No, fully. Like, it's so easy to, shout from the sidelines what you do differently once you've already seen it make work. Like, it's another thing to, be the visionary in the moment and be like, actually, I want to take it this direction. And especially when there is a lot of money on the line, like, I'm talking about making some big alterations from the show, but at the end of the day, that is very risky to do. Like, yeah, it could go really well, it could also go very badly. So yeah, it's not easy. And there are some great CG producers of Avatar: The Last Airbender 2024 live action remake in partnership with Nickelodeon. Cool to explore. Also, one thing I really appreciated about this was the first time I really felt like I was like, we've talked about movies and books galore on this podcast before, and like, analyzing like this. This is the first time I really felt like I was like full on studying storytelling. Like I was like watching this show and really like, I want to see what I would do differently and like how this feels, why I don't like this, and like what's rubbing me the wrong way and stuff. And then also going back and comparing it with the other one and being like, how did they handle the same thing? And, and then you also have the cool meta element that Matan brought up about the shadow of the movie and the show and like all these things. So there's more, meta narrative going on. It was just really cool. Like, obviously, I do study storytelling all the time, but it was really cool in this regard. And it's an excellent exercise for anyone to just play around. Like, when you don't like something, see what you would do differently, or like, watch something that is really, really good and try to pick out why it's really good. Like, why do you like it? And, be really honest. Do you like it because they're actually doing something cool, or do you like it because it has some nostalgia elements or whatever? And that's fine too, but just like, for the sake of the exercise, try to recognize that. Yeah, it's cool stuff.
You want to wrap up with an Uncle Iroh quote, or is that too cheesy for us?
No, I'm here for that. That sounds perfect.
So Uncle Iroh is like this world's version of Confucius, basically, dropping truth bombs left and right. And one sentence that I saw from him that really stuck with me is he says that to Zuko. This quote is not at all related to writing, so sorry, listeners. But it goes like this. True humility is the only antidote to shame. And I think that summarizes Iroh and Zuko, who Zuko becomes so well. And yeah, that was a good quote.
I love that moment, like, because that also just comes right after, like, he's like, what do you mean? Like, I don't have shame. Like, I'm as proud as ever or whatever. And then he's like, pride is not the opposite of shame. Only, and then he says that. I'm just like, my mind. Thank you, Uncle Iroh.
Teach me, Sensei.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Well, thank you all very much for listening. This has been Pros and Cons, podcast by emerging writers for emerging writers. If you enjoyed listening to this podcast, we do encourage you. We have quite a backlog at this point, so feel free to explore there. Have some fun listening through all this stuff. I mentioned a fan fiction episode we did. If you want to listen more about Marvelization and some of the pitfalls of fan fiction and serialization and stuff like that, we talk all about that in that episode. Yeah, we do. As we're hours out from the new Mythic audiobook dropping, so you could still pre-order that now, and then if you miss that in a few hours, you could just order it or just buy it. But we're very excited about that coming out. There's a lot of hours went into that. It's got some great voice talent on it, some amazing bangers on it. James, the song that introduces your story is like, every time I hear that, I'm just like, Jesus,
good.
That drops.
Right.
It's a gut thumper.
Who knew Alex is so talented, right?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, yeah. He nailed it.
Like Alex, I had expectations, but you knocked it out of the park.
So many like distinct genres, like so many different genres of music.
He should like consider a career in music or something like that.
Yeah. Meta narrative. He has a career in music. But anyway, check us out. We do write and all that stuff. Also, I meant to say this before when I was talking about the podcast, but if you did like it, feel free to leave a review. It helps other people find it. So that'd be great. If you do buy the new Mythic or have already bought the written version of the new Mythic, a review there goes a long way as well. And it also just makes us feel very special. There is a link in the description of this episode. You can click it and you can contact us and we will talk to you. So be prepared to be talked to. And you can let us know, give us your own opinions on Avatar if you've watched them, and we'd love to hear what you think about it, as well as if there are any other topics that you'd like us to cover, any other shows you'd like us to cover on the show. We'd be happy to have a look at them and talk about this for you. as well as for us. It's a great deal of fun. With that, we'll leave it. Thank you.
Thank you.
And goodbye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
You're listening to Pros and Cons, a Precipice fiction podcast.